we move on to the first presentation. In this presentation, I would like to give you a greater understanding of field epidemiology. The title of this presentation is Developing a Field Epidemiology Training Program in Japan. I would like to ask if anyone has ever heard about field epidemiology training programs or FETP in Vietnam. Or do you have any ideas about FETP Vietnam? FETP Vietnam started very recently, approximately 2 or 3 years ago. So let's move on to the details of developing FETP in Japan. Up to now, I was recruited by the National Institute of Infectious Diseases organization in order to start FETP Japan in 1999. Currently it has ran for 13 years. I will start with the initial situations that led to the creation of FETP in Japan. Firstly, in 1990s, there was large-scale EHEC outbreak in Osaka, Japan. EHEC. Have you ever heard of it? EHEC is enterohemorrhagic Escherichia coli. It is an E. coli infection. This outbreak was quite big in Japan. There were between 7,000 or 8,000 children who had been infected. Unfortunately, several of them died. This outbreak was an eye-opening event in general for the Japanese community, government and professionals. The secondary point was in 1999, when a new regulation, Infectious Disease Control Law, was enacted. And finally, the third point was the formation of the International Network of Field Epidemiologists. One example is TEPHINET. So due to these situations, FETP Japan started in 1999. Before continuing on FETP Japan, I would like to ask if you are aware of how many countries have national FETP programs. You might remember the number of all countries in the world is 300 plus some territories. Among them, the number of countries having FETP is only around 50 or 60. The oldest one is US CDC in the United States. They started CDC around 1950. And have accumulated more than 60 years of research and experience. Thailand, Taiwan and the Philippines are all countries with a long history of FETP in Asia. If I remember correctly, they are all 20 years old. FETP Japan was started in 1999. And so is just 14 years old, but all the FETP in the world have the same goals. The first goal is to establish a corps of epidemiologists. The second one is to strengthen local capacity and to create FETP networks in Asia and across the globe. These are the long-term goals of FETP Japan. Currently, we have 13 cohorts with 6 trainees, which is a very small number. The first 12 cohorts had 50 trainees. This, a very small capacity, is a disadvantage of our program. In Japan, we have 47 prefectures. Based on my long-time perspectives, I would love to put graduates of FETP in each prefecture to establish a network. These are my long-term goals. I believe it may require another 10 years. So these are the 6 components of a 2-year FETP that epidemiologists should keep in mind every day. Firstly, outbreak investigation. This is the major activity of field epidemiologists and is the most visible. 1. Next, surveillance activity and communication, which means the dissemination of information from outbreak investigation or surveillance to the public community or the decision-makers, following on research activity over 2 years. They are expected to conduct epidemiological research on communicable diseases. The fifth component is training seminar, such as this one. Finally, the sixth component is teaching experience, because after 2 years, following graduation, they progress and move to another prefecture. They can be the core of the local network, which requires some experience of teaching. These are the major components of the 2-year FETP. As I mentioned, we have 6 components, and FETP trainees must be thinking about these 6 components daily. This is just an example of each one of the components. Outbreak investigation. We experienced a EHEC outbreak in Japan, as I mentioned. Japan now has a very big program of EHEC and measles or vaccine-preventable disease outbreak. In Japan, measles is very close to elimination due to drug victories and advances over recent years. And as you heard in the morning lecture, our countries in Asia will hold activities Measles Nation in 2015, and also nosocomial outbreak. Though I do not move on to the details, I just use this as an example. Not only local outbreak in Japan but also international activities will be involved. One of them is SARS in Asia between 2003 and 2004, so our activity during this part in Vietnam, Hong Kong, for China is to join the international team for SARS outbreaks in 2003-4. Some of you may have experience of the surveillance activities in Vietnam. According to this morning lecture, the number of reportable diseases in this country is around 50. If I remember correctly, in Japan, the number of reported diseases is more than 100. It is too many as far as I understand. The surveillance activities, including system evaluation, that is, the evaluation of surveillance system, VRE, which is vancomycin-resistant enterococci and is an antimicrobiology issue, and communication. As I mentioned, we disseminate the information from outbreak investigation or surveillance to the scientific communities. Our professionals are general community and decision makers also. And research activity. Maybe you will find this slide on your handouts. Maybe later we will take a closer look. So these are just the examples. And training seminar. So, today and tomorrow, I will print the training material for you. These materials are for the introductory course of FETP Fellows. We will have an introductory course at the very beginning, 4 weeks on the newly coming FETP, so today and tomorrow, I will give you some basic training materials on the introductive course and a short seminar. We are going to recruit some consultants from overseas or from Japan, from the same Japanese institutes that have several training seminars on specific topics. For example, hospital infections or the foodborne or waterborne diseases. And finally, the sixth component is teaching. They need teaching experience in order to become the core of the local network. Perhaps there is no need to try this during this course. This is just an example of our activities. This is the final slide of my first presentation, so my future perspective is to set up a network for field epidemiologists in Asia. That means now our FETP Japan has expanded. 10 years have passed since FETP Japan started. Over the last 5 years, I have been involved in the establishment of the FETP network in Asia. One example is working on the Mongolia FETP myself to provide technical support to the Mongolian FETP, and also to provide technical support to both the Laos and Cambodian FETP. So next time I visit the Mongolian FETP to share experiences and provide some technical support. That is one of the future perspectives. And the second future perspective is expanding our niches, as you may understand during this course. Field epidemiology is useful not only in infectious disease but also for another part of your programs such as chemical, poisoning, environmental or hygiene, and useful not only for public health issues but also for social matters such as economics or education. So my second future perspective is to expand our field of activities to other places outside of public health, outside of the combating communicable diseases, because field epidemiology is useful not only for public health issues, not only for community combating communicable diseases, but also other fields, other problems in our life. For more than 10 years, I have worked in FETP. So this is only a short orientation and introduction for you. Next, I will give you the second presentation, which is on disease transmission control. This presentation will give you some idea on FETP, field epidemiology. How did they think about combating communicable diseases and infectious diseases in order to control or prevent infectious disease?